Last time, we explored the Galapagos Islands, a land filled with magical animals and landscapes and interesting history. And today, we're going to talk about traveling the Galapagos independently, or should you go with a adventure travel tour group? There are pros and cons to both. I can't wait to explore this topic with you, so let's get started. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. Like I said, we've covered visiting the Galapagos Islands, what you'll see and what you'll do, and the adventures you'll have on our last episode. Today, we're going to talk about how you should do this. Should you do it independently like I did? Or should you book ahead to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into? So today, we're going to talk about the pros and the cons of visiting the Galapagos Islands independently or in group travel. As a general rule, on adventure travel vacations, I prefer to go with booked group travel. I prefer to go with an adventure tour company that I trust. I like it for the logistical planning. I like that I know that I don't have to worry about anything. I get to have a real vacation. It's not my problem to figure out everything. I know how much it's going to cost. And if there's problems that arise, it's not my problem to figure out. It's their problem. So there's lots of pros in my mind, of going with the tour company. However, you do pay for that service. You are paying to have a guide that's holding your hand the whole time, and there's advantages to having that guide in addition to that, but it does cost extra money. They also tend to be more upscale than if I'm traveling independently. A lot of times I'm going to go a little bit more down and dirty. I'm usually trying to save some money, and that was the case here. I had been on the road for 5 months. I'd spent a fortune. I had already gone on 2 active adventure trips. I did their Machu Picchu and Peru tour, and I also did Patagonia, and I did Antarctica with Hurtigruten, another new affiliate. So I had spent a ton of money on these 3 trips. I was like, I had saved up for decades for this big travel push that I've been doing the last few years, and the bucket was starting to run dry. And I was like, I think if I'm going to do the Galapagos, I was already on my way home practically because I was so far south. I said I was going to do this independently, and if it didn't work out, I could always go back. Spoiler alert, you can do both. But like I said, there's pros and cons. I don't need to go back with active, but there were definite advantages, and I would have had a different kind of a trip had I gone with active. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And remember, active, since they are one of my affiliates, you can save $200 by using my exclusive promo code ATA 200 ATA 200, and that works on any active adventures, or they've merged with Austin Adventures, so they've got hundreds of worldwide trips that are great for adults and or family, depending on which tour that you choose. Let's talk about the independent versus the group. So independent, of course, I got to figure out all the logistics myself. And so there's a lot of moving parts. I got to figure out the flights. I got to figure out how I'm going to get, this is an archipelago. How am I going to get between the different islands? There was ferries I had to take care of. I had to book my own tours because the action is in the water, and the water's not necessarily in the harbor. You don't want to be swimming in harbor water anyway. You got the gasoline, all that. You want to be out in the sea or out where all the critters are. And so I had to book individual day tours to do all that. I also wanted to do some hiking. So I had to book somebody that was going to get me up these volcanoes to do some hiking and whatnot. I had to figure out where I was going to stay. I had to figure out where to stay. I had to figure out how many days in each island. It was very time consuming. And as you've heard me say before, I do not like the planning of trips. I would much rather have somebody else take care of all that for me and do all that research. But I know a lot of people thrive on it and they love it. Noma comes to mind. So over the years, I found companies that I like to work with, most of whom have become affiliates here on the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I laugh. My sister Terry and I did Machu Picchu. Active was running a trip there. I knew it was going to be good. We didn't even read the itinerary. We just pushed the buy button. And so I found out a lot of fun things we did. I didn't know we were going to do until we got there. And that was kind of fun. Here, I had to figure out all those things. I had to research what is it that you want to see on the different islands? Which islands do I want to go to? And how much time are each of these going to take? So it's much more time consuming to travel independently than it is to go with a group when you can just push the buy button. And if you choose a good company, you know they're going to give you a good time. However, because with a group, you're going with their itinerary. If you're going independently, you have that flexibility. You can say, oh, I'm really into whatever the case may be. And you might stay extra at this one place and say, I'm not really into this other thing. And you might skip something that might have been on a group tour. Granted, the group tour is going to pick all the highlights. So chances are you're going to love everything you do. But when you travel independently, you will have that flexibility and that freedom. A pro that you get with a group that you don't get with the independent is you have a built-in community. You're going to be traveling with people, and I have found on these adventure tours you're traveling with like-minded people. I don't think I've ever traveled with anybody in these groups I haven't liked. I may not become best friends with them, but there's nobody said, oh gosh, they were a pain to deal with or to travel with. They're all, adventurers. They don't mind getting sweaty or dirty or doing whatever the fun things are. They don't complain. When you travel on your own, you might be alone. Sometimes I didn't have anybody to eat with for days or whatnot. And here was a big one that I hadn't even considered. Most people that go to the Galapagos, first of all, most people do a boat-based trip. And I would actually recommend the land-based trip. So you're on the island. So when you're not on the itinerary, you can wander the town or do whatever it is you want to do. I found that to be a great way to see it. A lot of the Galapagos trips, you're staying on a ship. So you're just with your little group that whole time. So I would recommend, regardless whether you go independent or with a group, or do a land-based itinerary. But so the thing that I forgot or did not consider was most people my age, and now I'm closing into my mid-60s, they are going on a group tour. So I hung out all week on my day tours with people that were the backpack young kids in their early 20s because this was, the least expensive way to do the Galapagos. Were they fine? Yeah. Did they want to hang out and did we have a lot of things to talk about in common? Not necessarily. So if I wanted to be with my people, I would rather be on a group tour than on the independent tour. I would say in my time there, and I was there about 2 weeks, I think there was 3 people my age on all those days on any of my day trips. None of which I kept up with. Where in a group, I can't think of any group trip I took that I have not made lifelong friends on. So there's a big difference there if you want the camaraderie and the community and to make worldwide friends. We talked a little bit about the itinerary. When you are traveling independently, you can personalize your itinerary. You can tailor make it to you. You can add white space in there to allow for serendipity. That's not necessarily going to happen if you're on a group tour. But I have found that companies like Active do try to put some white space in there and give you some free time in different places so you have a break from the group. So it's a little bit of a wash, but you do have more options and more ability to alter your days when you're traveling independently. I think traveling with a group, particularly with adventure travel, is safer than it is traveling independently. Again, you have somebody that's picking you up and taking you everywhere you need to go. I spend a lot of time by myself, walking by myself, sometimes walking at night by myself. I don't necessarily know where it's safe or not safe. And I do check with the locals, but they may not always be correct, or it could be the odd time that I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time. When you're with a group, there are safety in numbers. That being said, when you travel independently, you get to feel a little pat in your back because you have a little growth, because you have to figure out the logistics. You have to do all the little twitchy things. You've got to deal with the panic when you're at the ferry and you can't figure out which ferry to go and it's going to leave and now you're in the right line and all those kinds of things. You don't have to worry with that when you're with a group. They tell you, okay, be here, and they pretty much walk you hand in hand and take you right to your own little private little boat. Group travel is far more convenient for that reason, but because of all this convenience, because you have the guide, it is not as budget friendly as traveling independently can be. You can go very expensive independently, but if you want to go down and dirty, you can do that too. One huge thing, and something I didn't really appreciate a decade or so ago, was how important the guide is. And the better the tour company, the better the guides that they can attract. A guide does more than just keep you safe and make sure you get on the right bus or the right boat. They add to your trip. They know the history. They can tell you the nuances of a place. They have funny stories to tell. They know fun things. They've done this so many times. They know things that might be off the beaten path that are not necessarily part of the group. I remember when I was in the North Island, New Zealand, we jumped off a big cliff. We went on a whitewater rafting over a 21-foot waterfall. They weren't on the itinerary, but because our group was fast and we hiked fast, we had time in the day. The guides knew fun things to do, and we were able to do that. Were I by myself, A, I wouldn't have known to do it, and B, I wouldn't have been able to pull it off because logistically I wouldn't have been able to do it. So guides, to me, add their weight in gold to your trips. And so whenever possible, if funds allow, I would rather go with a guide, and I want to go with a good guide. I did not like my guide on my Egypt trip. It was a low budget tour, and I got what I paid for. I was able to see Egypt, but even though the guy was an Egyptologist, that was what he had his master's in. He would take us to some place, spend 5 minutes telling us about it, and then say, all right, I'll pick you up in an hour or 2 hours, whatever it is. And he goes have coffee and cigarettes. So he wasn't a guide. He was a person to get us to the places. That was it. And I should probably go back and get a better Egypt experience. So if you go with a good quality tour company, you're not going to have that. They are going to be fun, and they're going to make your trip fun and interesting and exciting, and you're going to learn all about the culture and the history of the place that you're going to. They'll often know about the plant life and the wildlife. They have encyclopedic knowledge of the place that they love and that they love sharing with you. A potential downside or con to group travel, it's one I actually really haven't experienced outside of the Egypt. I would say Egypt would be the only one that I would put in this category, is sometimes the group may not mesh the way you would like it to. So you might have some group dynamic issues. You might have somebody that's chronically late you got to wait for, or you might have personality issues or travel style differences and such. But I think on adventure tours, if you go with a real adventure tour, you're not going to run into that so much because they're almost self-selected to be okay. But that Egypt trip, again, that was not an adventure trip. That was a cultural trip. And it was a budget Egypt cultural trip. And that was a mistake. And when I learned a lesson on that. In Morocco, even though they made it sound like an adventure, my Morocco trip was also, as much as I loved Morocco, I chose the wrong group to go with. And I will always thank Peg for not being a pain about that, because Peg came along with me and we're like, oh, this isn't really an adventure. We spent the whole time in the van and less time actually seeing Morocco. And actually, when I got back from that trip, I did a episode on how to choose a tour company, because to me, that is a critical thing to think about before you plunk down any money. Before you invest your time, because how much vacation time do we all get, right? And before you invest your money, because travel isn't cheap, you want to make sure you're picking the right group tour that aligns with your personality and your expectations. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And I'll also put a link to the other episodes I did on the Galapagos Islands, so you can get a feel of the different experiences that you can have in the Galapagos Islands. So let's talk a little bit about the things that you will do on either independently or in a group tour. So I went to 3 main islands. I had a 3-island base, and actually this lines up with the Active Adventures tours as well. They offer 3 trips to the Galapagos. They have an Ultimate Galapagos, which is a 10-day trip. They have the Classic Galapagos, which is 7 days. And they have a Machu Picchu and Galapagos tour. And that you're not trekking to Machu Picchu, you're visiting Machu Picchu in addition to going to the Galapagos. But if you only have so much time, that could be a good option for you. Or you could do like a combo, what I did. I trekked Machu Picchu, and then I would tag on either the Classic or the Ultimate Galapagos. There's not much difference price-wise, so it's more a matter of if you can spare the extra 3 days, go for the Ultimate Galapagos. So what are the kinds of things you're going to do? What's a typical thing? So on the 3 islands that we visited, San Cristobal, Santa Cruz, and Isabella. So in San Cristobal, that's the island that I flew into. One of the fun things in San Cristobal was to go up to the highlands and take a highlands tour where you're up overlooking the island down below. You see the sea in the distance. It's very, very pretty. You get a nice hike, and definitely would recommend doing that. Another really good tour to do there is a 360 tour where you're going all the way around the island. This includes Kicker Rock. You're going to be taken directly to Kicker Rock if you go on the Active Adventures trip. I went on a tour that we did several snorkeling stops along the way. And again, in my Kicker Rock, it was cool. The current was very strong. And if I were not a strong swimmer, I would be a little bit cautious there. Definitely want to wear your safety jacket on that, your life jacket on that. I was never in any risk, but sometimes I felt like that current was pushing me further away than I wanted to. But again, you get to see all these cool things. So definitely do it. But just if you're a little bit antsy about that, you want to stay right by your guide. Maybe look at holding on to the life ring if you're nervous, or at least holding on to the rope. So that way, if you do get a little antsy or panicky, it's easy for you to get to something you can cling on to that you know you're safe, because the water's deep there, the current was strong, but it was oh so cool. And had the water been clear, if we had not had a storm a couple of days earlier, I would have been able to see all the big hammerhead sharks down below me. I would have loved to have seen that. But I wasn't willing to cough up the money to try again on another day, not knowing yet again would I be able to see them. So another day if I ever make it back down there. The beaches, of course, they have some beautiful beaches. And in fact, I think it's the Punta Carlos is considered one of the best beaches in all of South America. And you can get a nice sunset view from that beach. They also have an interpretive center that you want to make sure that you stop in and get a good idea of what's going on the whole islands and get a nice history on that. Also from San Cristobal, you can take a day trip over to Española Island, where you'll get a chance to see albatross and the boobies. And so that's certainly fun and certainly something you want to try to do as well. I thought Santa Cruz was the most developed, where it had the most restaurants. I think it was the biggest town and more things to do as far as just wandering around the town than some of the other islands. And on Santa Cruz, you have the Charles Darwin Research Station, which is good to visit. They have the lava tunnels, the Los Gemeles, that you want to visit. You want to go to Tortuga Bay and check out the beaches there. You can take a day trip to Floriana. That's where they had the mysterious death of the lady who called herself the Baroness on this remote island where some Germans had emigrated, I think the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken. So two German couples had emigrated there. They're living, separate, but doing their own thing there. This lady comes there and she decides she's like the Baroness, and she has these affairs and causes a little bit of ruckus there. And she winds up dead. Other people end up dead. And there's this big mystery as to what happened. And it must have been the 1900s, because I think the last person just died in the last couple of decades. And they were never able to figure out exactly what happened. So they made a documentary about it called The Galapagos Affair, Satan Came to Eden. And it's a fascinating documentary. And it's a portrait of this 1930s murder mystery that is as famous as the archipelago itself. It's also on Santa Cruz that you can see the giant tortoises. You can take a taxi up there if you're trying to do this independently. And it seems to me like, I think they said just have the taxi wait for you. I think it was like a 30-minute drive up there, if I'm not mistaken. So it was just cheaper just to have the driver wait for you while you do your tour, because you were on a walking time tour kind of a thing, and they'll know how much time to stay there. They'll also take you by to see the tunnels, which is really cool too, because you go down this little stairway and you're in this underground lava tunnel where the water had carved out this tunnel in the lava back when it erupted. They've got a really nice harbor. They've got the sharks that are all wandering around the docks out there. In fact, out in that dock, when I came back from one day trip, I can't remember where it was from, I really connected with these young people on the boat that day, and we decided we'd go to the grocery store and grab a beer and bring it out in the dock and watch the sun go down, have the beer. And so we go there, and we also learned a little trick. If you pour your beer into your water bottle, then you don't have to pay the deposit and return the bottle. So that was easy. We just do it all in one fell swoop. We grab our beer and off we go to the dock. And of course, the sea lions have taken over all the benches. So we're standing next to the sea lions at the edge of the deck. And this one sea lion was pretty sick. And he wanders over to us. He's about ready to go in the water. We're just watching him. He's like right in front of us. Because like I said, they don't bother you. They don't attack you. And so he comes right in front of us, and he just got violently ill, like both ends violently ill. And his illness went in the beer of one of my new buddies there. So it was gross, but very funny. And one of the things I remember about the deck of Santa Cruz was that very sick, I hope he's okay, sea lion. You can also take a day trip to Las Grietas, which is this large crevasse. It's like nature just took a big old cake knife and sliced through this lava mountain. So you had these long rectangular pools that cut through these towering lava cliffs. And you get to go down there and swim in it. It was a little chilly, but you go down and you swim in it. They give you like an hour or whatever it is to go swim. And the water's crystal clear, a little bit green colored, and it's a pretty greenish color, but not like an algae gross way. This is like a crystal clear green. It's quite pretty. It's cool because the sun has just this little sliver that it can get in to warm up the water in there. But it's very pretty to have these towering cliffs on both sides of you. So that's kind of fun. We also did a nice boat ride out to Pizon Island. And I think it was here that I had the amazing green turtle sighting. So we pull into this little cove that we're allowed to snorkel, and I guess we were allowed to be there for a couple hours walking up and down the beach. The water was filled with these green sea turtles, which are maybe shells of 2 feet, 30 inches long, and it was mating season. And frankly, I didn't think they should let us snorkel that close to the turtles, even though the guide said we could. I didn't want to be the one to cause something not to happen. And he was able to tell the difference between the males and the females, I guess, by size. He said there were 3 females on the beach. I counted 40 turtles that I could see right in the vicinity of where I was standing in this cove. So there's probably many more that were, where the water got a little darker and I couldn't see waiting. And basically these women, he said they were being raped, but they were mating all day long. And when they would get so exhausted, they'd climb up on the beach just to take a rest for a little bit before they'd go back out. And eventually, whenever she felt like she was sure she had been inseminated, then she would climb out of the sea and you could see the tracks going up into the bush where she would lay her eggs. And while they were mating out there, you just see them rolling and you'd wonder if they'd ever be able to come back up because they would be wrong side up in the shells and they're so big. How are they going to flip back over? And you wanted to go flip them back because you were worried they would die upside down, but they would usually manage to get back up, get right. And then once the eggs are laid, because she's going to try to find the softest sand she can, the softest dirt she can, because again, it's very brittle, harsh lava rock in most cases. And so she'll dig out her hole, lay the eggs. She finds a place where the temperature is just right to incubate the eggs, and they will stay incubated for 120 days. And then it takes the hatchlings about 30 days to work their way out of their egg up to the surface. And hopefully if they all kind of hatch around the same time, they're working their flippers together. It's a little bit easier for them because it's really tough for them to get up to the top, to get up and get out to sea. And in that time, the only thing they're eating is whatever's left out of their yolk sac. It's the only nutrition they have during this 30-day period. So time is of the essence for them to get up, get out, and get to sea. I didn't get to see any hatching because it was the wrong time for that, but just seeing the mating and just seeing that many turtles and swimming with all these turtles was amazing. But like I said, once I was in the breeding area because they were separated from this other area where we docked, there's no way I went to go in the water and disturb all the action that was going on there. But that was one of my fondest memories of the entire trip. It was absolutely amazing. Another island that I got to see and that is popular to go to and is on also the active trips as well, is Isabella. This is the island that looks like a seahorse. If you look at it from the air, it looks like a gigantic seahorse. And here you get a chance to walk over to Las Tintoreras, and this is where you will see a lot of the sharks hanging out. And so it's virtually guaranteed that you're going to see sharks from up above on your hike. There's also a tortoise breeding center there, so you'll get to go see all the tortoises, the land turtles, in their regular habitat, all different sizes, from the babies up to the big ones. I got to see the flamingos in the lagoon there. The Wall of Tears on Isabella Island is about 5 kilometers west of the harbor, and it was constructed between 1945 and 1959 by prisoners, as this was a penal colony on the island. The wall itself is about 65 feet tall and is said to have been the cause of thousands of deaths during its construction. The locals call it the Wall of Tears because they say it emanates an eerie series of cries, but I would say it's a Wall of Tears because my understanding is the prisoners, they make them build the wall, tear it down, build the wall, tear it down. Very sad. On a happier note, you can also see Los Toneles, which is you take the boat out to see where the water carved all these cool tunnels through the lava. And because of all the little nooks and crannies, I think I mentioned this last episode, it makes a great habitat for wildlife. So you'll see all sorts of fish and the birds and everything. It's just a very, very cool trip. And you can get out and you can walk on top, and it's just a lot of fun. So you want to make sure you get to see that while you're in the Galapagos Islands. There's several other islands that I did not get to visit, so it depends on how much time. These are the ones that you can get to easily by day trips. Like I said, you can either book those down in the harbor to go out on. You might have to book them in advance if you want to probably check before you go down, depending on how crowded it is down there. If you go with a guided tour, of course, they're going to have all that arranged for you and all your transportation on the ships arranged for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Again, another reason, particularly if things are busy, if you're going in the high season, that you would want to use a tour company versus winging it like I did. I had the flexibility if I couldn't, say, go to Floriana or something that on the day I wanted to go. I was there for several days that I could jiggle it a little bit, but you may not have that option. In retrospect, I think that you can see the Galapagos both ways. And so I think it should be more a matter of how much time do you have, how flexible you are. Will you be disappointed if you can't see the things that you want to see? If you're like, time's more important to me, I want to make sure I want to see all the things I want to see, then I would recommend that you definitely book the tour. And again, I would recommend going with my affiliate, Active Adventures, using the promo code ATTA200 to get $200 off. That way, you know you're going to see all the highlights and the must-sees of the Galapagos Islands. If you're more flexible or on a lower budget, and the only way you're going to be able to see the Galapagos Islands is to do it independently, then I would allow plenty of time so that if you get there and things are booked, you'll have the flexibility to go on different days. So it's not like if I don't get out to Pinzón Island tomorrow, I can't go. You want to allow some white space in your days so that you have the opportunity to fill those in. But regardless of whether you go independently or with a group, go to the Galapagos Islands. It is amazing. The animals are amazing, and I will have fond memories of my time in the Galapagos Islands for the rest of my life. Cannot more highly recommend. Be sure to check out the videos I uploaded on my Active Travel Adventures YouTube channel. The sea lion and the sea turtle videos are amazing. If you've enjoyed this 2-part series in the Galapagos Islands, I encourage you to share it with a friend. Maybe get a friend together and you go to the Galapagos Islands. Put it on the list. Stop waiting. Make it happen. I sure appreciate you listening. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on.